Written into Florida's own administrative code is a phrase that should stop every coastal homeowner in this state cold. The state defines a critically eroded shoreline as a segment of coast where erosion and recession of the beach or dune system have reached such a degree that upland development, recreational interests, wildlife habitat, or important cultural resources are, and these are the state's words, not mine, threatened or lost. Threatened or lost. That is not a headline, an activist group, or a television forecast. That is the legal language the Florida Department of Environmental Protection uses in an official document it updates every single year. And here is the number attached to that phrase. In the most recent report, published in August of 2025, the state lists 451 miles of Florida beach as critically eroded out of roughly 825 miles of sandy coastline in the entire state. Do that arithmetic slowly. More than half of Florida's beaches carry a state designation saying development, habitat, or history is threatened or already gone. But here is what almost nobody tells you about that list. And it is the reason this video is going to be different from every fear piece you have seen. The state is not just tracking this, the state is fighting it hard with more than $1.5 billion. And whether that fight is being won or lost depends entirely on which town you are standing in. And there is one more number that puts all of this in perspective. When the state published its very first erosion list back in 1989, it identified 217 miles of critically eroded shoreline. Today, that figure is 451. The list has more than doubled in a single generation. Some of that is better science and more careful measurement. A great deal of it is not. So today, I'm going to walk you through 10 Florida beach towns that the state's own report names as losing ground to the ocean, using the state's own miles and the state's own language. Not my opinion. Their document. And at the end, I'm going to tell you exactly what that designation should and should not mean if you are thinking about buying on the Florida coast, because the honest answer surprised me. Let us count them down. First, understand how a beach gets on this list, because the villain here is a single one, and it is simple. It is erosion. Not the storms alone, those storms accelerate it, not the tides alone. Erosion is the slow, patient removal of sand from a shoreline, wave by wave, season by season, faster than nature replaces it. Every beach loses and gains sand constantly. The trouble begins when the loss outruns the gain, and the water starts reaching for whatever people built behind it. And that is the key to the state's definition. A beach is not designated critically eroded just because it is shrinking. Plenty of Florida shoreline erodes without earning the label. It becomes critical when the erosion reaches the point where something people care about, a house, a road, a habitat, a piece of history, is in the water's path. That is why this list is not really a list of eroding beaches. It is a list of places where the erosion has caught up with the development, and that tells you what the state is actually measuring. Not the beauty of a beach or the health of the sand. A conflict. On one side, a shoreline that wants to move. On the other, everything we built assuming it would stay still. And these 10 towns are where it caught up the hardest. Number 10 is Pensacola Beach, out on the Panhandle on Santa Rosa Island. The state's finding here is stark in its simplicity. The entire 8.2-mile length of Pensacola Beach is designated critically eroded, threatening development and recreational interests, not a stretch of it. The whole thing. This is one of the most beautiful sugar white beaches in America, and the state has it flagged end to end. Dune restoration was performed after the storms of the 90s and 2000s, and a beach restoration project was completed in 2003. That is the pattern you are going to see again and again in this video. The designation is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of the state's response. And the reason the whole island qualifies is worth understanding. Barrier islands like Santa Rosa are not permanent land. They are piles of sand that naturally migrate over decades. Build a town on one, and you have decided that a moving thing must now stop moving. Every seawall and every truckload of sand is the bill for that decision. Number 9 is Key West at the very end of the island chain in Monroe County. The state's language here is worth hearing precisely. Nearly the entire south coast of the island of Key West is critically eroded, extending for 3.6 miles. And then this line, which is the whole video, in a sentence. Erosion along the eastern portion of Key West eliminated the recreational beach. Eliminated. The beach did not shrink, it went away. A restoration project has since been built at Smathers Beach, and smaller nourishment projects have gone in at Rest Beach, Higgs Beach, and South Beach, with a seawall along most of South Roosevelt Boulevard. Key West is proof that in Florida, a beach can be a thing you have to build and rebuild on purpose. And the Keys are a special case. The state's report says outright that several of the sand keys west of Key West have known erosion, but lack sufficient data to even be included. So the 15 miles listed for Monroe County is not the whole picture. It is the part that has been measured. Number 8 is Anna Maria Island in Manatee County on the Gulf Coast. Here, the state does not bother with individual segments. It simply says that all of Manatee County's coastline is designated as critically eroded. All of it, 13 miles, with 7.9 of those running the full length of Anna Maria Island itself. The island is held in place by a federal beach restoration project, numerous bulkheads and revetments, and a groin field in Terminal Groin at the south end. There's another detail here that should give you pause. Passage Key, a national wildlife refuge just off the north end, has been reduced by erosion to an intertidal shoal. An island became a sandbar. That is what this process does when nobody intervenes. And that is the honest counterweight to every restoration project on this list. Passage Key is what a Florida barrier island does when no money is spent on it. Anna Maria Island, a few thousand feet away, is what one looks like when the money is spent. Same water, same storm, same county. Two entirely different outcomes decided by a budget. Number 7 is Fort Myers Beach on Estero Island in Lee County. The state designates 5 miles of Fort Myers Beach as critically eroded, threatening development and recreational interests, and notes that the entire segment is a beach restoration project. Southwest Florida took direct hurricane damage in recent years, and the erosion here is the long tail of that. And this is a market where the pressure is visible in the numbers too, with Zillow showing values across this region among the softest in the country, and Redfin showing homes taking far longer to sell than they did at the peak. When the beach itself is a maintained project and the market is soft at the same time, a buyer needs to be asking harder questions than usual. The state also notes that a stretch of southern Estero Island has been gradually disintegrating through erosion, threatening development, infrastructure, and wildlife habitats, which is a piece of a populated barrier island coming apart, described in the flattest language imaginable. If the state's own list is already naming a beach, do me a favor and tap the like button, because it genuinely helps push this in front of other Florida buyers before they sign on a coastal home without ever reading this report. And the towns ahead are where the miles climb the highest. Number 6 is Miami Beach, along with Surfside and Bal Harbor in Miami-Dade County. The state's summary is blunt. Most of Miami-Dade County's barrier island coast, north of Cape Florida, is critically eroded. The specific segment between Baker's Haulover Inlet and Government Cut runs 9.4 miles, threatening development and recreational interests along Bal Harbor, Surfside, and Miami Beach. Think about what that means. The most photographed beach in the state, the one that sells Florida to the entire world, sits inside a designated critical erosion area, and the reason it still looks the way it does in the photographs is that it is a beach restoration project. That sand is there because people put it there. And that is not a criticism. It is arguably one of the great engineering successes in the state, because the project works year after year and tens of millions of visitors never know. But the beach you are looking at is a managed asset with an ongoing cost, not a permanent feature of the landscape. Number 5 is Fort Lauderdale and Pompano Beach in Broward County. The state's report opens the Broward section with a sentence that needs no translation. Nearly all of Broward County is critically eroded. 21.9 miles are specifically identified, including a continuous 10-mile stretch running south from Hillsborough Inlet, along Pompano Beach, Sea Ranch Lakes, Lauderdale by the Sea, and Fort Lauderdale, threatening development and recreational interests, including State Road A1A. That is worth pausing on. It is not only houses at risk in these segments, it is the coastal highway itself. And along the southern 8 miles of Broward, the state names Dania, Hollywood, and Hallandale as threatened, with restoration projects ongoing and seawalls fronting the private development. When a county's answer to the ocean is a near-continuous line of concrete plus a permanent sand budget, that tells you how the fight is going. Number 4 is the town of Palm Beach in Palm Beach County, which at 33.6 critically eroded miles is the second most eroded county in the entire state. The segment extending south of Lake Worth Inlet along the town of Palm Beach runs 10.9 miles, threatening private development, local parks, and State Road A1A. And listen to how the state describes what is holding that shoreline together. Most of this segment of coast has seawalls, bulkheads, and revetments, plus numerous groins, a beach restoration project, and an inlet sand transfer project. Some of the most valuable real estate in America sits behind an engineered wall of human effort. And just south, in the town of Manalapan, the state notes that at least 20 seawalls were destroyed by a single storm along a 1.4-mile stretch. Seawalls are not permanent, they are a bet. Further south, the state lists the communities of Ocean Ridge, Briny Breezes, Boynton Beach, and Gulfstream inside another critically eroded segment, along with Delray Beach and Boca Raton, where erosion threatens parks, private development, and again, State Road A1A. This is not a few unlucky properties. This is essentially the entire developed Palm Beach County coastline. Number 3 is Daytona Beach in Volusia County, which carries 27.2 critically eroded miles. The main segment runs 16.6 miles along Ormond Beach, Daytona Beach Shores, Wilbur by the Sea, and the town of Ponce Inlet, and the state's description is quietly alarming. This segment threatens development, recreational interests, and sea turtle nesting areas, where the dry sand beach has become very narrow. Most of this segment is armored with seawalls. The dry sand beach has become very narrow. On the beach famous enough that people drive cars on it. And the market has already felt something, with Zillow showing the typical Daytona Beach home down more than 8% over the past year to around $259,000, one of the steeper slides in the state. To be careful, that price move is driven by the wider Florida market, not by erosion alone. But the two facts sit side by side in the same town, and a buyer should know both. Number 2 is the Brevard County coast, the towns of Cocoa Beach, Satellite Beach, Indian Harbor Beach, Indialantic, and Melbourne Beach. Stay with me for the final two, because these are the two entries where the state's own language stops sounding like a report and starts sounding like a warning. Number 2 is the Brevard County coast, the towns of Cocoa Beach, Satellite Beach, Indian Harbor Beach, Indialantic, and Melbourne Beach. Brevard is the single most critically eroded county in Florida at 41.2 miles. South of Canaveral Inlet, the state designates one continuous 36.5-mile shoreline segment as critically eroded, threatening development, recreational interests, and wildlife habitats. One unbroken stretch 36 miles long. And north of it, a 4.7-mile segment along Kennedy Space Center is critically eroded, threatening, in the state's words, manned spacecraft facilities, launch pads, Phillips Parkway, and buried infrastructure. The ocean is not only reaching for beach houses in Brevard County, it is reaching for the launch pads. Beach and dune restoration has been performed at Canaveral, Cocoa Beach, Satellite Beach, Indialantic, and Melbourne Beach, which is the state's way of telling you that nearly every town along that 36-mile run has already needed help. So there is the scale of it. But before I give you the final town and the honest truth that changes how you should read this entire list, there is one resource worth knowing about if any of these towns is on your radar. I keep everything in one place, a single breakdown of 40 Florida towns, 20 that are genuinely worth buying into right now, and 20 worth staying well away from, each one with the specific reason attached, including coastal risk. If you want to see which side of that line a town falls on before you ever make an offer, the link is waiting in the description. But stay right here, because the number one town is the one where the state says the ocean may break all the way through, and right after it comes the fact that reframes this entire video. And number one is Jupiter Island in Martin County. The state designates 11.5 miles of Jupiter Island as critically eroded, and then says something I have never seen in a government document about a Florida town. The erosion along this shoreline threatens wildlife habitat, including, and again these are the state's words, the potential to break through Jupiter Island at Peck's Lake. Breakthrough. The state of Florida is on the record saying the Atlantic could cut a new opening straight through the island. Also threatened, and in the state's plain language already half destroyed, is the Joseph Reed Mound, an archaeological site that appears to have been constructed more than 4,000 years ago, during the late Archaic period. The entire town of Jupiter Island is inside this critically eroded area, where development and recreational interests are threatened. Jupiter Island is one of the wealthiest addresses in the United States, and the state's own report says the ocean may cut it in two. So there they are, 10 towns, one villain, and the state's own document naming every one of them. Now here is the honest truth, and it is the most important thing in this video, because it is the part the fear channels will never tell you. Florida is fighting back, and it is winning more of this fight than you would ever guess from the list. Since 1998, the Florida legislature has dedicated more than $1.5 billion to beach management, with nearly $315 million of that going specifically to hurricane recovery. That funding has restored and maintained more than 264 miles of the state's critically eroded beaches. The state's own report says roughly half of the designated critically eroded beaches are currently being managed. So this is not a story of Florida standing still while the ocean takes the coast. It is a story of an enormous, expensive, decades-long engineering effort that most people have no idea is happening. Think about the scale. More than $1.5 billion sustained across nearly 3 decades, cost shared roughly a third each among federal, state, and local government. Florida has treated its beaches as infrastructure worth paying for consistently for a very long time. And here is the single most important detail in the entire report, the one that should change how you read every number I just gave you. When a beach gets restored, it does not come off the list. The state says so directly. Those shorelines retain their critical erosion designation in order to retain their state of Florida funding eligibility for long-term management and monitoring. Read that again. A town can appear on this list with its beach restored, wide, and healthy, and it stays listed so the state can keep paying to maintain it. So critically eroded does not mean the beach is gone. In many of these 10 towns, it means the opposite. It means someone noticed and someone is spending money on it every year. So what should this actually mean to you as a buyer? 3 things. First, the designation is information, not a verdict. It tells you a shoreline needs active management, which is genuinely useful to know before you buy, and which almost no seller will volunteer. Second, ask who is paying. A restored beach is not free, and the money comes from a cost share among federal, state, and local government, which means local taxes and assessments are part of the picture. Ask the town how their beach project is funded and when the next nourishment is scheduled. And third, understand the trend. A beach protected by a maintained restoration project is a very different thing from a shoreline retreating with no project attached. Both can be on this list. Only one of them should worry you. That is the real lesson of the state's report. Not that Florida's beaches are lost, they are not. But that Florida's beaches are increasingly a thing that has to be actively maintained. The postcard is real, it just has a maintenance schedule. Now I genuinely want to hear from you because the comments on these are always the sharpest part. Have you watched a Florida beach, change over the years, narrower each season, the dune line creeping toward the road? Tell me which beach and what you saw, because someone scrolling right now is about to buy a home behind that exact stretch of sand. And if this helped you see the whole picture instead of just the fear, hit the like button and subscribe, because the state updates this report every single year, and I would rather you hear what changed from me than find out at your closing. Because that is exactly what is coming next. The state's report also names the beaches that quietly came off this list, the shorelines that recovered so completely the designation was removed. Those places tell you where the sand is actually winning, so stay with this channel, and we will name the Florida beach towns where the coast is gaining ground instead of losing it, before the rest of the country figures out where they are.